Good morning. I call this hearing to order. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for this official hybrid hearing. I want to make sure to note some important requirements. Let me begin by saying that the standing House and committee rules and practice will continue to apply during hybrid proceedings. All members are reminded that they are expected to adhere to these standing rules, including decorum. During the cover period as designated by the Speaker, the committee will operate in accordance with HRes 965 and the subsequent guidance from the Rules Committee in a manner that respects the rights of all members to participate. House regulations require members to be visible through a video connection throughout the proceeding, so please keep your cameras on. Also, please remember to remain muted until you are recognized to minimize background noise. If you have to participate in another proceeding, please exit this one and log back in later. In the event a member encounters technical issues that prevent them from being recognized for their questioning, I will move to the next available member of the same party, and I will recognize that member at the next appropriate time slot, provided they have returned to the proceeding. For those members physically present in the committee room today, we will also be following the health and safety guidelines issued by the attending physician. That includes social distancing and especially the use of masks. I urge members and staff to wear masks at all times while in the hearing room, and I thank you in advance for your commitment to a safe environment for all here today. We are meeting today to conduct an important hearing on the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, and specifically a review of the loan forgiveness process. I want to thank each of the witnesses for their testimonies today. Over the past several months, this committee has held numerous hearings on the PPP, and we've heard from borrowers and lenders about the challenges they faced in accessing the program. I've also traveled across my district of Burlington County and Ocean counties in New Jersey to speak with business owners about how they've fared through the pandemic. And I've heard some of the successes and challenges they face with the PPP and uncertainty about what the future holds. From borrowers who eventually did access the loan, the committee heard concerns about complicated, unclear, and sometimes conflicting program rules and other requirements associated with loan forgiveness. Lenders also expressed a great deal of frustration over the needlessly complicated rules and reported feeling unable to adequately help their borrowers through the forgiveness process. Through it all, borrowers simply wanted to ensure they were using loan proceeds consistent with the law so that they could qualify for full loan forgiveness and effectively convert the loan into a grant, which was the congressional intent in the CARES Act. Loan forgiveness is a centerpiece of the Paycheck Protection Program, especially since the expectation by many borrowers and lenders was that the loans would be fully forgiven. Less than full forgiveness for a large body of loans could have serious unintended negative consequences for borrowers and lenders who have developed business plans around full loan forgiveness. As early as June, SBA and Treasury recognized how challenging the initial loan forgiveness application was and released an easy application form. Unfortunately, borrowers and lenders alike have reported no material differences between the forms, and calls for streamlined application form for small dollar PPP borrowers have increased. In the meantime, lenders have remained limited in their ability to provide guidance to the borrowers, leading to great anxiety and helplessness among borrowers who just want to do things the right way and need clear and simple rules from SBA and Treasury in order to do so. And finally, we have some data to corroborate what the lending community has been reporting anecdotally. This week, the Government Accountability Office, GAO, published a new report showing that as of September 8, SBA had only received about 56,000 forgiveness decisions from lenders and representing just over 1% of the over 5.2 million PPP loans outstanding. This figure substantiates what the lending community has been reporting anecdotally. First, borrowers are struggling to simply understand the terms and data needed to accurately complete the form. And second, lenders are limited in their ability to provide technical assistance to borrowers completing the forms because of the insufficient guidance. So as we enter the forgiveness period, it is timely to conduct this hearing dedicated specifically to loan forgiveness so that our subcommittee can assess the issues faced by borrowers and lenders and weigh proposals to provide relief for borrowers who need it. I look forward to the discussion today and thank each of you again for taking the time to testify before us. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Hearn, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this very important and timely hearing. Small businesses across this nation, from my state of Oklahoma to the Chairman's District in New Jersey, have been disproportionately devastated by COVID-19. When it reached our country, Congress acted fast. Numerous programs were created and amended to provide assistance to the American public and our economy. One of these programs was the Paycheck Protection Program. In a matter of days, the SBA and the Department of Treasury outlined rules and regulations so that lenders could start assisting small businesses from coast to coast. The federal government moved quickly, and I would like to commend them for that. One of the top SBA officials in charge of PPP testified yesterday and presented important information to our committee. Today's conversation will build on that hearing and will focus on the critical aspects of PPP loan forgiveness. As a small business owner for 35 years and the founder of a local community bank in Oklahoma, I can see how difficult this process can be for borrowers and lenders alike. My goal, and I'd like to think it is the same for all of my fellow committee members, is to make this process, forgiveness process, as simple and as efficient as possible. We ask our lenders to carry a heavy burden, and our small businesses are being crushed under circumstances out of their control. We owe it to them to discuss further ways to streamline the process. Unfortunately, roadblocks continue to hinder how Congress can provide more assistance while improving the program. Just this week, we tried and failed to get a vote on Congressman Steve Chabot's H.R. 8265 that would improve and extend the popular program. More work needs to be done, and that is why this hearing is paramount. It is unconscionable that we would continue to ignore our nation's smallest firms that desperately need this assistance. Small businesses and lenders need full rules of the road in order to make everyday business decisions. Changing guidance has presented challenges we need to seek solutions to so this process can be improved. I look forward to exploring many of the topics today with our witnesses. However, I know there were some concerns that a witness put forward about a specific member of the House and the way that their office conducts business, even though this member is not here to defend himself. This, however, is not how we conduct business in this committee. We routinely strive to work in a bipartisan manner. It's important that we do. And we do not attack one another for political gain. And I'm extremely disappointed that my colleagues would allow this testimony to be on the record. Truthfully, many of the problems that our witnesses will bring up today could easily be solved if the majority would allow Ranking Member Chabot's bill, H.R. 8265, to come for a vote, as most of them, if not all, would support it. All of them have the opportunity to allow this bill to come for a vote by signing the discharge petition for 8265, which was filed by Representative Jamie Herrera Butler earlier this morning. So I urge my colleagues to take action to help the small businesses in each of their districts across the country by signing the discharge petition on the common sense legislation which they all support behind the scenes. I'd also like to say that this is the second time that I've been disappointed by the majority selection of a witness, and I hope that this is not a signal of the committee is becoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. I appreciate your comments. I'd like to take a moment to explain how this hearing will proceed. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your microphone is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when finished. With that, I'd like to introduce our witnesses before we begin. Our first witness today is Ms. Lynn Ozer. Ms. Ozer is president of the SBA Lending Department at Fulton Bank, a $20 billion regional bank headquartered in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She manages all of the SBA lending, which covers my home state of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and 249 office locations. She graduated magna cum laude from the Temple University, where she earned a BBA degree majoring in accounting. Ms. Ozer served as the first female chairwoman of the board of directors of the National Association of Government Guaranteed Lenders and she is presently co-chair of the Technical Issues Committee while serving as an instructor for the association. Welcome, Ms. Ozer. Our second witness is Ms. Amy Bonfig. Ms. Bonfig is the owner of Little Saints Academy, a child care center in central Minnesota. When so few PPP borrowers have actually applied for loan forgiveness, Ms. Bonfig has not only completed the longer application form, but has also started an informal network of fellow child care centers in Minnesota to help them work through the forgiveness application process. Ms. Bonfig, we look forward to hearing your feedback on the loan forgiveness application process as a borrower and welcome you here today. Our third witness is Mr. Jim Parker, a small business owner from my district. He is the founder and owner of Riverview Studios and a 42-year veteran filmmaker. He has produced numerous broadcast programs for public television. During his career, he has produced hundreds of multilingual documentary programs for corporate and nonprofit clients. He has also faced serious obstacles with the PPP forgiveness process, and we look forward to hearing his perspective on the issues as well. Thank you for joining us today from the New Jersey 3rd Congressional District, Mr. Parker. I would now like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Hearn, to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Pete Patel. Mr. Patel is the CEO and president of Promise Hotels, a company he founded with his wife 12 years ago. Promise Hotels is a hospitality business group that runs a dozen hotels in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, my district. With 25 years of experience, Mr. Patel is a current board member of the Oklahoma Hotel and Lodging Association and the Tulsa Hotel and Lodging Association. He is also a former board member of the Tulsa Metro Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Patel, we are grateful that you can take the time away from running your businesses to talk with us this morning. We know that you and the other witnesses are very busy, so we appreciate all of your time. Welcome, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. We're going to start with the witnesses here. So, Ms. Ozer, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and good morning, everyone. My bank made nearly $2 billion of PPP loans, serving 11,000 small businesses that were desperate, and lenders nationwide stepped up to implement this congressionally provided lifeline. We should applaud the countless success stories of businesses saved and employees retained, but it hasn't been easy. There were front-end issues, especially with eligibility and lenders' roles, and simple, no-cost fixes are needed in any future program extension. We must learn from what didn't work. When it comes to forgiveness, significant concerns need to be addressed now. Piecemeal guidance continues to create confusion. There is still no guidance for major issues, and without answers, I cannot help my borrowers. We have no idea how a guarantee will be honored when a business is permanently closed or filed bankruptcy. If loans have a remaining balance after forgiveness, we have no idea how we're expected to service those loans long term. For borrowers requesting permission to sell to new owners, we have no idea how to help them. More importantly, borrowers are confused by the burdensome forgiveness process and panic that the loans they believed would be grants if they followed the rules may become burdensome debt because they can't muddle through the paperwork. Borrowers remain confused about the covered period and how to document payroll expenses, especially as they struggle with their local government's shifting requirements. They're concerned about safe harbor calculation to help qualify for full forgiveness. One of our borrowers summarized her angst, I quote, "I have tried and read many instructions regarding the forgiveness application, but I still find it very confusing. I have even listened to multiple webinars. I would love someone to be able to translate that for me," end quote. This borrower is not alone. Virtually all borrowers share this concern, and so do lenders. To add to the confusion, borrowers and lenders see media reports that Congress will streamline forgiveness. Borrowers have delayed submitting applications, hoping for that change. I urge quick authorization of a simplified forgiveness for smaller loans. This must be prescriptive, or we'll wind up with another easy form, which really isn't making anything easier. Simplification would provide enormous relief. Congress must also prescriptively clarify the lender's role in the forgiveness process, identified by GAO as a major problem. From the outset, lenders believed we would be conduits for delivering federal assistance because we had the network and capacity the federal government did not have. Other than providing the capital quickly, our role as lenders was to be limited. Only after we made millions of loans did banks learn that we would have to verify the accuracy of the borrower's application and that forgiveness could hinge on this. We have gone from being a conduit to being deeply involved in an ill-defined process. At the heart of this issue is that the lender role, as defined by the agencies, creates an inherent conflict of interest. Lenders lend. We should not be the arbiter of who receives forgiveness from the government, especially when our decisions determine whether our own funds will be reimbursed. To this end, I urge you to clarify the lender's role in the forgiveness process as part of any streamlined application for forgiveness. I also encourage you to include a strengthened hold harmless section to better define lender responsibilities in verifying borrower-provided document and certifications. Lenders are on the front lines in delivering this crucial aid, and we must fully understand our role to be comfortable helping our borrowers. Until the many issues are addressed, many lenders will be reluctant to embrace or expand a new program. Most will agree that we need to fully understand how the forgiveness process will work, how SBA will honor its guarantees, and what the guidance still to come will say before we can even consider participating in new programs or extensions. Otherwise, we will not be able to give borrowers the help they are seeking and deserve. Finally, a reminder that the best tool to assist America's small business long-term in good times and bad has always been the regular 7A loans. We need the same temporary 7A enhancement provisions like fee waivers and guarantee percentages high lifted that have worked previously so well in tough times we've experienced before. They will work again. Supporting the 7A loan program means extending the Section 1112 debt relief payments, which are hugely stabilizing and have been for the existing SBA portfolios and also encourage new lending. Funding remains for these 1112 payments, and I cannot think of a better tool to provide meaningful assistance to small business. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for your statement there. I appreciate it. We're going to turn it over to Ms. Bonfig now. So you're recognized for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the time to share my experience with the PPP forgiveness application process. My name is Amy Bonfig. I'm the owner of Little Saints Academy, a licensed child care center in St. Joseph, Minnesota. I'm honored to have been chosen to speak to your committee today on behalf of myself, my lender, our local Small Business Development Center, and 30 fellow child care centers in central Minnesota. I have also been working with Barry Kirchhoff, the director of the Minnesota Central Region, SBDC, to gather and share information as it becomes available. Our local SBDC office has been a vital resource for Little Saints Academy over the last 10 years and continues navigating through this hardship with us. During the start of the pandemic, child care centers were asked to remain open and care for essential workers' children. With no guidance, our collaborative of child care professionals joined together seeking information, creating a safe space to ask questions, feel supported, and make decisions as a group for the children we care for, our staff, and our businesses. With little to no financial aid, suddenly the Paycheck Protection Program became available, and I was incredibly grateful to receive a forgivable loan. Through this process, I have kept myself and our group aware of changes. I created a spreadsheet for the group because it was a very lengthy forgiveness application process. I met with them via Zoom to help make sense of it when I could barely make sense of it myself. I spent much of my time over the days and several months focused on the success of our PPP loan and the forgiveness. It was incredibly time consuming. And at the end of our covered period, after funds were nearly exhausted, the forgiveness application finally appeared, but with a new term, owner employees, which was completely mind boggling because we had to be counted as full-time equivalents on our loan application, and then we couldn't count ourselves in the full-time equivalent count for Safe Harbor. Because of that, I was unable to spend my entire loan in 8 weeks. Extending 2 weeks of the payroll, I can benefit from the entire loan. But we didn't find out about the 24-week extension option until we were in our 8th week and had exhausted most of our funds. After my covered period, I had no choice but to lay off staff. With the uncertainty of COVID-19 and the ability to stay open or even meet the full-time equivalent Safe Harbor criteria, I was too afraid to choose the 24-week option. Now the rules have changed again, but the SBA is not giving my lender needed information to submit my application. I do understand the concept and the intention of the program, but without forgiveness, the reality is I currently have an unforgiven loan that was used to pay my staff the benefits they really should have been able to collect through the Minnesota Unemployment Program. The child care directors and owners that I bring with me today have expressed similar fear of failure regarding forgiveness. Many do not understand the complicated rules, the cryptic stipulations of the application, and most do not have the luxury of time to sort it all out. With that being said, I want to steal a moment to advocate for the recognition of small business in the childcare industry, especially after watching my brave and resilient colleagues step up during this time of fear, uncertainty, and chaos. Please understand that we need your support. We need peace of mind knowing that our loans have been forgiven as we look to the future financial stability of our programs. We run our daily businesses on tight budgets with our fingers crossed that we will make it financially another day. We did this in the old normal, and we're doing it in the new normal. We would like you to consider other expenses that may be relatable to forgiveness, such as PPE, thermometers, sanitizers, cleaning products, bleach, even professional cleaning services. For centers that don't qualify for the USDA food program, including the cost of feeding the children would even help tremendously. I would like for you to consider making this a simpler process. The easy form still needs many of the calculations in the long form to fill out the application honestly and accurately. 6 unrelated date ranges to pull reports and gather required information from is way too complicated. Please consider some degree of automatic forgiveness, or at least a forgiveness process with fewer criteria. On behalf of my fellow child care providers, I thank you for allowing me to speak to you on behalf of our situation as you move forward with decisions about the PPP loan forgiveness.
Thank you, Ms. Bonfig. Thank you for sharing your experiences there. I want to turn it over to Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker, you're now recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Chairman Kim, Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about our experiences with the Paycheck Protection Program and the program's loan forgiveness process. My name is Jim Parker. I own Riverview Studios, a video production company in Bordentown, New Jersey. I'm a member of the executive committee of the Main Street Alliance of New Jersey, a network of small businesses in the Garden State, and the chapter of the National Main Street Alliance. Earlier this year, I applied for PPP funds and received $11,200 through the program. Having used the PPP funds by early summer, I'm now waiting to begin the process of closing out the loan. In my case, I'm hopeful that 100% of the loan will be forgiven under the rules of the program. And now I say hopeful because I can't be sure and say for sure that that will be the case. As I and my operations manager are just beginning the process, we found that much could be done to clarify the terms of forgiveness and the process to obtain it. It's still unclear what the timeline is for beginning the process, the steps we need to take to complete it, or the criteria we will be judged on to receive forgiveness. The documents we've received from our bank thus far have also raised concerns about the likelihood that the entirety of the loan will be forgiven. For example, it looks like we will be requested to provide information about our mortgage expenses during this time and expenses related to other fixed costs like utilities. We've spent the entirety of the funds on payroll, so we expect the sum will be forgiven. But the application leaves us confusing and leaves us concerned that our spending on fixed costs will reduce a portion of what portion of the loan is forgiven. We're also concerned about the lack of clarity regarding any appeals process. What if we are requested to repay a portion of the loan, but to believe that that decision has been made in error? Small business owners in our network in New Jersey and nationwide have experienced other roadblocks in the forgiveness process. One member's bank has contracted out the forgiveness processing to a third party, but the website that this third party has built to process applications malfunctions to the point of uselessness. Another member has reported that their application using the alternative dates option is being questioned because her payroll falls on the 5th and 20th of the month rather than every 2 weeks. Several members have received notice from their banks that forgiveness process will be put on hold indefinitely because proposed legislation may change the rules regarding forgiveness. And other Main Street Alliance members, especially those in the restaurant industry, have expressed concern that they will miss out on forgiveness because they've not been able to rehire staff at the necessary level to qualify for forgiveness because the business has not been picked up sufficiently to necessitate their pre-pandemic workforce. Our experiences illustrate a process that has thus far been opaque, arbitrary, and uneven, with private lenders choosing how and when they will implement the forgiveness portion of the program. This risks repeating the mistakes made in the design and rollout of the program itself, which excluded vast portions of the small business sector, often the most vulnerable businesses, and has worsened economic inequality, especially for businesses owned by people of color. I count myself as one of the privileged businesses who received federal funds, and I'm grateful. I'm also relatively confident that those same privileges that helped me access these funds will help me in the process to get them forgiven. I know that not every small business owner finds himself in this position. Many are going into the process themselves without the help of an expert staff member. I know if it were left to me to sort this process out, I'd be in far worse shape. For these reasons, Main Street Alliance supports legislation that would provide automatic forgiveness for loans under $150,000. Given the confusion surrounding the process and shifting guidelines, this would level access to forgiveness and alleviate stress for many small business and micro business owners, particularly those with less access to support from their banks and accountants. And because most businesses have now exhausted their PPP, we believe the smartest plan to save our small business economy starts with grants, not loans, so we can cover payroll and keep people employed through the pandemic. This is an existential crisis for small businesses in America. I believe it's not trickle down, but rather trickle up economics that fuels our economy. Putting funds in the hands of ordinary people puts money back into the economy and keeps America working. We're counting on our leaders to take the bold action that this crisis requires. Thank you very much for your time and interest in Main Street small businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for your testimony. Appreciate that. We're going to now move over to Mr. Patel. Mr. Patel, over to you for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Kim, Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the committee. It is an honor to speak before you today, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story with you. My name is Pete Patel. I am a proud first-generation American. My family and I immigrated to the United States from India in 1979 in search of the American dream. We founded in Tulsa, Oklahoma as hoteliers and small business owners. I am also a member of the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, which represents 20,000 members who own half of all the hotels in the United States. My wife Tina and I founded Promise Hotels in 2008. We own and operate franchise hotels in eastern Oklahoma. During the past several years, our businesses have done well. We've grown our operations and created and reacted to favorable economic conditions. Before the economic crisis caused by COVID-19, the lodging industry was enjoying record occupancies and profitability. Unfortunately, the coronavirus pandemic halted travel almost overnight. During our busy season, our hotels should have occupancies about 80%. Instead, we've been lucky to hit 20% in some weeks. Our revenues have fallen by 50%. Most tragically, we have had to lay off employees for the first time in my career because we simply don't have enough customers coming through our doors. At the onset of the virus and as travel restrictions took hold, hoteliers and small businesses needed a lifeline. We're grateful that congressional leaders came together so quickly to pass the CARES Act. In particular, I appreciate how Congress prioritized assistance to small businesses and our employees. We use the PPP predominantly towards payroll and utilities. The PPP did have a few drawbacks, some of which could not have been known at the time it was created. First, the maximum loan amount of 2.5 times monthly payroll only carried us for a few months. We are now at the end of that period and funds have been exhausted. Accordingly, we have reviewed the forgiveness process and it has proven to be exceedingly complicated. From the time the PPP was created, the guidelines for forgiveness was often unclear and fluid. The complexity of the forgiveness application portal for each business is also quite time-consuming and burdensome. I would also like to note that the PPP funds have been crucial to the survival of our business. I understand there is discussion in Congress about creating a second round of funding for small businesses that have suffered greatly because of the economic downturn. As the hotel industry has lost our busy season and are now facing our slowest time of year, I strongly urge you and your colleagues to quickly pass legislation that would authorize a second round of PPP to help us to save jobs and to keep our businesses open. At the beginning of the crisis, our banks would work with us to defer payment on principal and interest for a few months. Largely, however, that forbearance has run out and banks are telling us that our notes will come due soon because of the pressure they are under from banking regulators to classify our debt. But there's a solution. The Main Street Lending Program was designed to help small and medium-sized businesses survive the crisis by providing a critical bridge when they needed it the most. However, asset-based businesses have been excluded from participating in this program because of the underwriting methods employed by the Federal Reserve. It's small businesses like hotels that have suffered the most in this unreasonable standard. Earlier this week, Secretary Mnuchin and Chairman Powell asserted that conditions do not warrant expanding the Main Street Lending Program to include hotels and other asset-based businesses. I urge the members of this committee to work with your colleagues to expand the Main Street Lending Program for asset-based businesses like our hotels. Chairman Kim, Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the committee, I sincerely thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my perspective on the outlook of the lodging industry in the United States. I am grateful for your leadership and look forward to solutions you propose to help our country during this unprecedented pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Appreciate your testimony here. We're going to move over into the question period, and I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes here. As I mentioned earlier, I've spent quite a bit of time touching base and going visiting a lot of small businesses in my district as they're facing these challenges. And what I've consistently heard from them is a message about unease about what the future holds for small businesses and their employees. My focus here is that our economic recovery touches everyone, not just those at the top, and we need to make sure that the smallest businesses are being brought along in the post-COVID-19 recovery. The delivery of the PPP loans was a good first step, but I worry that the complicated piecemeal guidance on the loan forgiveness could become burdensome to the business owners that we have heard today. Getting that clear information on forgiveness is critical to the businesses, and I wanted to start with Ms. Ozer about what you described, because you described it in sort of in great detail here. And I just wanted to kind of pull out a few pieces here. As a seasoned SBA 7A lender, can you evaluate the quality of the PPP loan forgiveness guidance you've received from SBA and Treasury? And also, can you also evaluate the user friendliness of the loan forgiveness application for the average small business borrower? I know you touched on some of this in your testimony, but I just want to kind of bring it out a little bit more here.
Thank you so much for your questions. And Congressman Kim, I do have 226 PPP loans in your district for over $48 million. So I'm quite familiar with the 3rd District in New Jersey. That being said, to answer your question, and I know I did point this out and in detail in my written, but the lack of guidance from the SBA is something that I have never seen before in all my years dealing with the SBA. Their guidance is usually very prescriptive and clear. This is not the case with the PPP program. We certainly understand the speed at which they had to give out guidance, but it's come piecemeal and it's confusing. And if it's confusing for the lenders, that just translates to the borrowers. We can't help our borrowers if we ourselves don't understand the guidance. So that's what has been, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems. The application itself is burdensome. As you just heard so eloquently from your three witnesses, every single one of them can point out the problems in the application process. Again, I talked about the easy form, which is not easy. It's just different, and it still requires the same amount of documentation. And I also talked about the problems in the PPP with the conflict of interest. It puts the lenders in a really bad position. We're unclear of our role. Are we, when we jumped into this with both feet because we absolutely wanted to support the communities that we lend in, our borrowers, our customers, and the entire small business community because we are working through unprecedented times. But we were asked to be the conduit. We were not acting as lenders. We lend, but we were asked to simply pass on information and deliver funds through our networks that the government couldn't do. And this was a problem. And now they're asking us to verify information and verify certifications and documentation from the borrowers. That puts us in a very unusual position because we would love to see every borrower have forgiveness. And we would love to be reimbursed for all the money that we put out on the street. But there's no clear guidance.
Well, thank you for that. Mr. Parker, I want to turn to you. I understand, as you said, you have a business manager on staff who's helping you with the loan forgiveness application process. I also understand you have 4 employees on staff, a true micro business. I can't imagine that without that support staff that, how this process would be for you. So can you expound on the value of having someone on your staff with expertise on the business side of things to help you navigate this PPP application process, and what impact has that had on your ability to focus on the revenue generating activities of your business, which is the, producing documentaries and digital video?
Thank you. Yes. I've been really fortunate to have access to a full-time person whose pretty much sole job is to take care of the financial aspects, to navigate the application process and all. But even she has a hard time getting the information. I also have access to an accountant that I trust who is available to me. I am a producer of films. I am not an accountant. I was never trained in business. So every minute that I spend doing things that are not related to producing a program is time taken away from and reducing our income. So it's been invaluable to have access. I've been very fortunate, and I understand that many businesses do not have that same benefit that I have. I never could have done it alone. I would have had to forego the process, but it's the amount that we did receive helped us immeasurably. It enabled us to keep people on, and we were going into a very busy time at the time COVID hit. So I needed actually additional staff, and having these funds enabled us to maintain our business and to pivot and to serve our customers. We're only able to do the work if our customers need us, and so we're dependent on our customers being able to pay us as well. So it's a full circle.
Well, it certainly hits at the challenges of staffing during these particular times, but also needing to focus bandwidth on these complicated issues. My time has expired, so I'm going to turn it over to the ranking member, Mr. Hearn. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, as you described in your testimony, the hotel industry is very unique. This means that your industry has faced very specific challenges during the emergency crisis. that other industries may not have been confronting. It comes to debt service. Can you talk more about the environment in your territory in Oklahoma and the unique challenge that you face and your industry faces?
Thank you, Congressman Hearn. Yes, we are facing some deep challenges, primarily of just having funding to continue with operations. Most hotels throughout the country have seen revenue drops anywhere from 50% to, in some cases, 80%. Some are still closed in major metropolitan areas. We predict that a third of all of the hotels may see closure, and that is saddening to hear that an industry that has done so well and is my livelihood. That's the only livelihood I know could see closures. We need Congress to step in to give us some additional assistance. The pandemic is something that nobody asked for, and with regulations on closures and travel restrictions, we were probably the hardest hit industry out there. And so, again, without additional help, there'll be a huge amount of closures. And then it'll put our community banks, who have been very generous to us when we decided to grow and borrow money, it'll put them in a compromising position also. So I think that's some of the things that we need to also keep in mind, is it's a trickle down. Other industries will be affected with what happens in the hospitality industry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patel. I've listened to all the testimony very intently, read it all prior to the committee hearing, and I just want to say to each of you, thank you for what you've done to survive and continuing to survive. And I know that's no way to run a business. As I mentioned, being in the small business arena for so many years, you really want to provide opportunities for your employees, for opportunities for growth, promotion, and also to expand your businesses. With that said, I know many of you know that there is roughly $135 billion of unused PPP money that's out there. And if we could, for the essence of time here, I'd just like to get your thoughts on this. Would you, just simple yes or no, we'll move through, would you support a second round of PPP loans, extension of the PPP duration, expansion of covered PPP expenses for PPE, and a simplified forgiveness process? Mr. Patel, we'll just start with you since we're talking already. Would you support that?
Yes.
Ms. Parker, Mr. Parker?
Absolutely. Yes, I think so. I think it's important.
Ms. Bonfig?
I would be grateful to be able to participate in it again.
Mrs. Ozer?
A conditional yes, because until we fix the situation at hand, I think lenders are a bit reticent to jump back into the pool, because the existing program has quite a few flaws, and especially the forgiveness process. We're stuck in a place where we don't have clear directions. We need a simplified process and procedure. We need defined lender roles. We need hold harmless for lenders. We need to strengthen the hold harmless provision that's in there. We need a guide that takes 27 IFRs and 2 rounds of FAQs and put them into one document with clear guidance, so we as lenders can help our borrowers. We jumped in with 2 feet, but now we're sort of stuck in the mud, and we need to get out, and we want our borrowers to get out as well.
Well, I thank you for that. And what I know, again, having never been in politics before I became a member of Congress less than 2 years ago, is that small businessmen and women in America don't care 2 hoots about politics. They just want to figure out how, again, they can take care of their employees, their customers, and grow their business. And I would encourage us all. I would encourage us all to work hard on getting HR 8265, which does a lot of what Ms. Ozer just said, to get it on the floor for passage. I think it would be overwhelming majority would pass it, and we can get these other $135 billion out to folks like our witnesses. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Hearn. We're going to turn it over to Congressman Schneider for your comments and questions here. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Kim, and I appreciate you hosting this important hearing, and I thank you, as always, and the entire committee and the committee staff for navigating the difficult dynamics of congressional oversight during this unique time. Data from the Small Business Administration demonstrates that the Paycheck Protection Program helped save more than 90,000 jobs in my district alone. It was a crucial lifeline to thousands of small businesses in Illinois and around the country. I represent the suburbs of Chicago. Earlier this month, we experienced a week of unseasonable cold temperatures, and it was a wake-up call, as the local brewery owner noted. It put everybody on notice on what we're going to do when it's 30 degrees outside and can only operate at 25% capacity inside. As winter looms, the PP funds have now been mostly depleted. Meanwhile, COVID is still coursing through our country, and the pandemic is ravaging our economy. While the president and his administration continue to play down the crisis, small businesses are struggling to see the path through. It's not enough that they struggle with the economic challenges of this crisis. They also now have to deal with the unnecessary complexity associated with determining their eligibility for PPP forgiveness. This is a real challenge. We will never get through this crisis until we beat back the virus. But meanwhile, we need to make sure that we are providing relief to our small businesses so that they can continue to operate and provide critical jobs within our community. We need to work to get to the recovery where these businesses can see their future and start to grow again, and ultimately, most importantly, get to a place where we can renew our economy. But this can't happen without ongoing support. So, as others have noted, I'm hopeful that we can work to find a path to another relief package that will extend PPP and provide new resources for these businesses. But as we look at the current situation, if I can turn to Ms. Ozer, as a lender, you've seen firsthand how businesses are trying to navigate through this forgiveness process, the cost of the complexity for that. Do you have a sense of how many of your clients have had to contract with outside help to get through the process of applying for forgiveness?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I do not have specific data on that, but anecdotally, I can tell you that it runs the gamut. As one of our witnesses suggested, the businesses with the wherewithal have certainly contracted with outside vendors. We know just simply from the amount of questions that come into our call center that all of the borrowers need outside help. The ones that need it the most are the ones with the least amount of capital to go and hire outside help. So what do? They look to the banks. And that is problematic because we need to help them and we don't have clear guidance.
Thank you. And then those smaller companies, if I can say it for one moment, the smallest of companies that don't have the resources, how are they applying for the forgiveness, or are they facing a situation where they're just going to be stuck having to pay back the loan?
Well, the latter is an unfortunate possibility, but we as the lender have, and they as the borrowers hear time and time again in the media that there's going to be a streamlined forgiveness process, which we are fully supportive of. This is not automatic. We know the government needs to make sure that they prevent against any kind of fraud and abuse, but a streamlined process for the lenders and the borrowers to be able to help the smallest of borrowers is essential, and that's what we're looking for. And honestly, the amount of people that haven't applied for loans is pretty high compared to those who can, because they are all still hoping for the streamlined forgiveness. Because They aren't getting the answers from the lenders because the lenders don't have the answers to give them. So a streamlined application is critical.
Okay, thank you. And in the last few seconds I have, if I can turn to Ms. Bonfig, and thank you for sharing your story. You're trying to figure out how to navigate the next few months, but the services you provide to parents who are trying to get back to work are also critical. How do you see the biggest challenges looking ahead?
I see us having positive cases being a huge challenge in continuing to charge the parents tuition so that we stay afloat. Some of them aren't being paid and they're working at home but keeping their kiddos with us. We had a positive case and we had to contact the Minnesota Department of Health, and a college student working for the Department of Health got to make the decision to close us down. And that was very frustrating. We had to close one of our classrooms for over 7 days, and it cost us about $8,000. That, how do we make that up?
Sure.
So that challenge is real. I actually am part of a group that meets with the governor's children's cabinet in Minnesota, and we've talked extensively about having some sort of a program like unemployment for childcare when we end up, and maybe it's not just childcare, but that's who we're dealing with right now. But that maybe we have some sort of an unemployment type bank where we can call in and say, okay, we had to close this classroom for 7 days. This is the amount of income tuition that we had to forego, and have some kind of a help that we have the confidence to know it's there. Would be so helpful to a lot of us and keep us honest. That's one of the biggest things that I fear, is that parents are not going to tell the truth about their kids being sick. Providers aren't going to be honest about sickness in their center because they're fearful of losing the income. And that's probably not just in our industry, but that's my worry for us.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm over time, so I appreciate the time. It's just important that we have clarity, that we have simplicity, and we have consistency in the application of these policies. So I thank the witnesses. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you for yielding back. We're going to turn it over to Congressman Stauber. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I sit here dumbfounded. The Paycheck Protection Program, which has provided a lifeline to small businesses across this nation during this pandemic, has been shut down for 48 days now. With over $135 billion in funding, the PPP is only shut down because of Speaker Pelosi's unwillingness to bring meaningful legislation to the House floor. The Speaker would rather use small businesses as political pawns rather than get things done. H.R. 8265, the legislation that Ranking Member Shabbat introduced, and I have co-sponsored, would reopen the PPP through the end of this year. On top of that, it would give small businesses the ability to receive a second loan. It would provide more flexibility in how PPP dollars can be spent, and it would simplify the forgiveness process. So instead of working on legislation that would bring more relief to 30 million small businesses across this great nation, Nancy Pelosi and Democrat leadership have been focused on passing legislation that gives them cheap political talking points for this election cycle. In fact, the Speaker was so afraid that the PPP legislation would pass, she canceled session for today. She knew that her moderate members and my good colleagues on the other side of the aisle were going to sign that discharge petition, which would force that bill to the floor and help small businesses across this great nation who are the engine of our economy. And we cannot lose sight of the American small businesses who are looking for us for financial relief in their most desperate hour, which is why I signed that discharge petition this morning. And that calls for the immediate consideration of H.R. 8265. Partisanship should have no place in these halls during this pandemic, and it is my hope that we vote on this important legislation soon. So with that being said, I want to turn my questions to Mr. Patel. Mr. Patel, thank you for being here. And for the sake of time, I simply want a yes or a no answer to the following questions, if you're okay with that. So, Mr. Patel, would it be helpful to small businesses to be able to apply for PPP loans through the end of 2020, as would be the case if H.R. 8265 was signed into law?
Congressman, absolutely, yes.
Okay. Mr. Patel, would it be helpful to small businesses to have access to a second PPP loan, as would be the case if H.R. 8265 was signed into law?
That would be greatly needed for our industries and many other industries, yes.
Mr. Patel, would it be helpful to small businesses to have more flexibility in the eligible expenses for their PPP loan, such as operation expenditures, property damage costs, and personal protective equipment, as would be the case if H.R. 8265 was signed into law?
Yes.
Mr. Patel, would it be helpful to small businesses to have a simplified forgiveness process, especially for loans under $150,000, as would be the case if H.R. 8265 was signed into law?
Yes.
You know, it would seem to me that the answer is simple. Speaker Pelosi needs to take swift action to help small businesses across this great nation, rather than using legislation for cheap political bargaining chips. I request and demand Speaker Pelosi bring H.R. 8265 to the floor immediately to help the small businesses across this great nation, which still need our help. They are the engine of our economy. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I wanted to turn over to Congressman Spano. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Kim and Ranking Member Hearn, for hosting the hearing today. I want to thank each of you for testifying about your experience with PPP forgiveness process. As of August the 20th, in my district alone, which is the 15th district of Florida, Central Florida, 10,254 businesses have received $304 million in PPP loans, saving tens of thousands of jobs. For many, the program has been a lifesaver. I've actually talked with so many of them since the launch of PPP. Like one, for instance, Mr. Powell, I can think of specifically. He owns a company called Boulder Athletic Wear in Plant City, and they manufacture women's athletic wear. The program was a lifesaver for his business because it was an easy application process that provided a quick capital infusion to help make sure that he could retain his employees through the retail closures. One of Mr. Powell's biggest concerns as he goes into the forgiveness process is that while the PPP funding made a significant impact, the business has still not fully recovered, as is the case with the vast majority of businesses across the country. His biggest request has been for a second round of PPP funding to help them as the economic recovery continues. My questions for Mrs. Ozer, you mentioned that Fulton Bank has approved nearly 11,000 PPP loans for a total of almost $2 billion, and that you've already received notices from many of your PPP borrowers that have either closed their doors or filed for bankruptcy. And so my question to you is, out of those 11,000 some odd PPP loans that Fulton Bank has approved, do you have a specific figure or do you have a sense, one or the other, for how many notifications like this your institution has received? So how many of these 11,000 businesses would you say at this point today have either closed their doors or filed for bankruptcy?
I do not have the exact figures. Anecdotally, I've spoken to at least 5 different businesses that are planning to close. However, there are borrowers out there that we don't know about, and so I cannot put a figure on it. The problem is that without being able to have any direction on what to do with these loans if a borrower does go out of business or does declare bankruptcy, we question how we collect the guarantee from the SBA because there's no guidance on that. Your question about the exact numbers, I don't know. I mean, we've had chat rooms with lenders all across the country who have been experiencing this, that businesses are closing and some of them are filing bankruptcy, but there's also businesses that are trying to sell. And there's not enough guidance on what we should do for them if they have a PPP loan and they want to sell their business. They need to strike while the iron is hot. And they're unable to sell their business because there's no guidance on how we should do that if they do have a PPP loan. So there's a lot of things that need to be fixed in this program so that we can clearly help our borrowers.
Thank you, Ms. Ozer. I appreciate that. And I think your experience is consistent with my experience and many of the lenders that I've spoken with, and certainly the small business owners I've spoken with, some of whom have gone out of business after literally decades of being open, some of them generational businesses that they've spent literally decades building and have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so I would also encourage, as Mr. Stauber has just said a moment ago, for leadership in the House to put aside some of the partisan issues, particularly as we lead up to the election here. Let's put the interests of the American people, specifically our small businesses. Let's figure out what we need to do to fix the problems that the lenders are having and getting confirmation on what to do to get these loans forgiven. And I think in large part, this legislation would fix those issues. But let's hear the concerns and the cries, really, of small businesses who are trying desperately to keep their businesses open. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Congressman, for yielding back. I just had another question or two and just wanted to throw this out there. And if anyone else has any other members have any further questions, please let me know and we can do that. Otherwise, we can start to wrap up. Ms. Bonfig, I wanted to kind of revisit something that you had mentioned. And as a borrower, completed the full loan, you were describing the complexity of that situation, the complexity of the easy form and the others, and the time-consuming aspects of that. And I'd like to just see if you could give me a little bit more specificity about what you're saying about the complexity, even of the easy form, and how it doesn't actually give you that much more leeway than sort of the fuller form. I just want to kind of hear this in your own words from your experience.
Okay. I did the full long form. As soon as it came out, I started working on it, and I created a spreadsheet to help me through it because I had so many different sections, so many dates and information that I needed to add in there, and I couldn't just use current staff. I had to go back and pull ex-staff that was no longer with me, and find all their information for the current term, all the terms that were asked for in the long form. It was exhausting. It was frustrating. There's no easy way to pull that information quickly. So after having that done, I literally had just turned mine in and the easy form came out. So that was frustrating in itself, but I started looking at the easy form, and the reality is you still have to do almost all the work behind the scenes. They just changed the front page a little bit. So you still have to go back and you have to fill out the worksheet. You have to fill out Schedule A. Schedule A gives you 6 or 7 little lines to put your staff in. When you have, and I'm not alone, when you have 30 plus staff, you have to create your own spreadsheet. You have to do what you have to do to get the information together. But I wonder how many people who put this information together actually stepped into a business and tried to actually apply for the forgiveness. Because I think if they had, there's a lot of this that is so confusing when you read it. And I don't consider myself a dumb person. I don't consider myself a genius either, but this should be easy enough for me to understand the first time I read it. I shouldn't have to go back to it over and over and over again and go, I don't understand what that means. I don't understand what they're asking for here. It's very, very confusing. I don't know how to help some of the people that I'm trying to help, because if you read on the application, the full-time equivalent reduction safe harbor 1, if you just take, 15 seconds and read through it, okay, wait a second, I got to go back and read that again because that made no sense. And so, and again, the owner-employee aspect of all of it, when that came through, that was very frustrating because I have a partner who was not an owner last year, but was an employee. And now it said that I can only use this much of 8 weeks of what she made last year as an owner employee. Well, she wasn't an owner. So 8 weeks of 0 still equals 0. In the same regard, I have a partner who was not an employee last year, but is now both an employer owner. He made 0 last year. 0 times 8 weeks is still 0. So now I can't count any of their income, and there's nobody answering these questions. I actually had our representative from the Small Business Development Center email a member of the SBA, and the response that we got back was, work it out with your lender. So Lynn, I'm sure that you're probably feeling those things too. Work it out with your lender is not an appropriate answer to come from the SBA who's running the program.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Bonfay, and thank you all of you for just your honest challenges and assessments of what's happening here. Mr. Patel, my district has a lot of shore towns, a lot of tourism aspects of a lot of hotels and hospitality that are struggling. Mr. Parker's from my district. He knows how difficult things have been, throughout there, especially in our, hometown there in Bournetown, which is a small business town, and folks are trying to do everything they can to try to make that move forward. And Ms. Ozer, the way in which you've been talking through this has been incredibly helpful, really just giving us some sense of what you're seeing, because you're seeing it across the board. You're seeing this on a macro level, which is really just helping fill out some of the conversations here that we've had. Ms. Bonfig, thank you again for just what you do as a father of a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I know how tough it is for child care centers, and that you're trying to do everything that you can to try to do this right, keep the kids safe, keep our families safe, and that it's a tough business even in normal times. So, thank you for what you're doing there. I really appreciate that. For us, as Congress is weighing solutions for these small dollar PPP borrowers seeking forgiveness, we have to keep in mind that simplicity will be key for most small businesses here. The simple fact is that these firms, especially the micro businesses, do not have accountants or attorneys on staff, as we've heard today, the challenges that many of you are facing, and would therefore face additional and unnecessary barriers to accessing full loan forgiveness. SBA and Treasury have come together before to provide a somewhat abbreviated, easy forgiveness application, but as we just heard today, it's still not easy enough for the average small business owner. It's still a lot more that we have to do. Agencies should come together once again and provide a streamlined loan forgiveness application for small dollar borrowers who represent the vast majority of all PPP borrowers. If the agencies insist on the status quo, I'm sure the members of Congress on this committee will work together in a bipartisan way, as we have so often in the past, to craft a solution to these problems. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting material for the record, and without objection, so ordered. And if there is no further business before this committee, we are adjourned. Thank you so much for participating today.